So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sarah Pate, and I'm a librarian at the Washington State Library. My projects are the Washington Center for the Book, Ask WA, the statewide virtual reference cooperative, and Washington State Library social media. I'm also the current chair of the Washington Library Association's Special Libraries Division. And Kelsey Smith, who is also here today, is the current vice chair. Fun fact about Kelsey, she actually created the Zine library at the Olympia Timberland Library, which is one of the libraries we'll be touring. Kelsey did that when they were a librarian at TRL. So last year we did a series of virtual special libraries crawls, and I'll be putting the links to those events in the chat after this introduction if you'd like to check them out. We hosted events with law, tribal, and art libraries last year, and those are all available for viewing on Washington Library Association's YouTube channel. Today's event is the first in our 2022 series, and we in WLA's Special Libraries Division are once again thrilled to be partnering with the Pacific Northwest chapter of the Special Libraries Association, as we did last year for the series as well. So I just have a couple of quick items before we get started. We are recording today's event. It will go up on the WLA YouTube channel afterwards, so you can share it with anyone you think would be interested. Following today's tours, we invite you to stick around for the social portion of our call. It's a time to join a Zoom breakout room and get to know your fellow library colleagues from around the region and well beyond. Whoever is here live with us today that wants to stay. So now SLA Pacific Northwest Chapter President Laura Grove and I are going to take a quick moment to tell you about our organizations and some of the benefits of membership. The mission of the WLA Special Libraries Division is to unite and strengthen membership by promoting continuous learning, partnerships, and sharing common skills and expertise utilized in specialized library and information settings. Along with events like the library crawl, we offer presentations and workshops at the annual WLA conference and participate in career development programming, such as last year's Career Lab. You can add Special Libraries Division to an existing WLA membership for just $10. And if you're not already a member of WLA, you can add the Special Libraries Division with the register for no additional charge. WLA membership has a number of great benefits, including discounted conference registration fees, great programming, video conferencing, access to the Alpine magazine, job announcements, and more. And now I'm going to hand it over to Laura Grove to tell you a little bit about the Pacific Northwest chapter of SLA.
Thank you, Sarah. Membership in SLA provides networking opportunities with other special librarians, education through an annual conference and other events, leadership development, and industry information such as a salary survey and a career center. This year's annual conference is in person in Charlotte, North Carolina from July 31st to August 2nd. Membership in the Pacific Northwest community can be added to an SLA membership at no additional charge. The current publication is Information Insights, a weekly curated e-newsletter to keep members apprised of recent developments in the field. Membership rates are posted on the website, including a student rate. This year, we particularly appreciate our collaboration with WLA SLD on events. Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, so if you have questions for our presenters during the presentations, please put them in chat. Kelsey will be keeping track of the incoming questions as they come in, and we'll share them with our presenters after all three presentations. So first up, we have the Olympia Zine Library located at the Olympia Timberland Library. Aggie Burstein is a public librarian at the Olympia branch of the Timberland Regional Library, where like many public librarians, they wear many hats, and being the caretaker of the library zine collection is one of them. Aggie is also one of the founding organizers for the annual Olympia Zine Fest, which started in 2015. They love bringing the joy of zines to the community, both inside and outside of the library. Aggie has also been a trusted judge for the annual Washington State Zine Contest for years. Take it away, Aggie.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to share my screen here. Everybody see that okay? All right. So hi, I'm Aggie. Like Sarah said, I'm a librarian at the Olympia Timberland Library, which is in Olympia, Washington. And I've worked here for about almost 8 years now. I'm excited to talk to you all today about our wonderful collection. Okay, cool. So first, a little bit of history of the collection. Like Sarah said in the intro, it was originally started by former TRL librarian Kelsey, who's here hosting the event today. Shout out to Kelsey. This year's actually our 15 years. It was started in 2007, so it's 15 years old. I took over as the second caretaker in 2014. Fun fact, when I interviewed for my job, they wanted to make sure the person who replaced Kelsey would be a good zine librarian. So I had to do a presentation on zines. And I think it's just really cool that the zine collection is a priority to the library. So over time, the collection has grown and moved several times around the library building. It's also had a great makeover in terms of shelving. So to demonstrate the transformation, here's a really old picture I found of the first version of the collection. This is with zine maker Taryn Hibb in the picture. It was in the furthest back corner, kind of a dark corner of the library. And it was shelved spine out, which is funny because zines don't really have a spine. So the picture on the right is our zine collection today. It's proudly located at the very front of the library now and is housed in these cool pull-out drawers so people can browse them record store style. A little about collection development and scope. So we strive to maintain a zine collection with a variety of perspectives and subject areas of popular interest. We do have some zines from the 80s and 90s, but a majority of our collection is contemporary and current because we're not an archive, so we're consistently refreshing the collection, both with acquisitions and by regular maintenance weeding. So the number of zines in the collection fluctuates, but remains around 2,000. And we have zines made by folks all over the world, but a majority of the zines in our collection are made by people who live locally or in the greater Pacific Northwest. So here's a picture of our new zines drawer where newer zines get highlighted for a time period before being integrated into the rest of the collection. So acquisitions, we're really lucky. We have an annual zine budget through Timberland Regional Library of about $500 a year. So that actually goes a long way in zine world. So we generally spend the budget in two main ways. The first is in person at the annual Olympia Zine Fest, where we can buy directly from zine makers themselves. And then with any remaining money, we will do an online order toward the end of the year. From various zine distributors like Brown Recluse, which is a BIPOC zine distributor based in Olympia. And then this picture is just one from our last indoor Olympia Zine Fest 2019. And I'll talk more about Zine Fest in a little bit. So cataloging, we're super lucky. Our zine collection is in the same public catalog with all of our other holdings at the library. So a lot of people, I think.
For now we're paying for all the new electrical crap. I just don't get.
Okay, so I think a lot of people find out that we have zines this way because zines will just show up in their regular keyword searches. So most of our zines are located at the Olympia branch, but patrons all over our 29 branch system can place holds on them and they'll be transferred to any location to be picked up. So yeah, we're super lucky. We have cataloging staff on board with this. So since we can't just copy catalog like with most everything else, we still use the same system that Kelsey created where we use kind of a standard set of zine subject headings, which is pictured here on the right. The subjects also correspond to the colored stickers that are placed on the cover of the zines. And that way patrons browsing the collection can also browse by different subjects visually. So yeah, we process the zines at the branch level by assigning the subject headings, and then they go to cataloging where they get input into the catalog and then back to us for shelving. So here's an example of what a zine record looks like in our public catalog on the left there, where people can easily just place holds on them and yeah, they circulate widely. So just a little shout out to the only other Timberland location with zines is the Lacey Library. We've tried zine collections at a few other branches over the years with less success. So as of right now, it's just Olympia and Lacey. And I wanted to show you what they do at the Lacey Library, which is organize zines into kits by different subject. And then the kits are in the catalog as well, so they also circulate across the district. So promoting the collection, this has a few parts. So first, the obvious displays around the library. Here's a picture on the left of a zine focused display, but we also try to just incorporate zines into every display at the library wherever possible. In the middle there, I made this guide, or it's basically a little zine I made about zines at the library. And then social media, we have a dedicated Instagram. It's at Olympia Zine Library, where we can promote the collection and any zine events happening. I've also done things like zine story times in our Instagram stories, where I read aloud different zines in our collection with permission, of course. And then more on promotion. So one of my roles as a zine librarian is not just to promote the collection, but also to promote zines and zine making in the community. So one of the ways I do that is with zine programming and events in the library. So I'll talk more in detail about that next. But I also like to make sure to maintain and keep fresh our zine making resources that patrons can come into the library to use. So here's a little copy of a flyer handout that I keep near the collection, so people know about all the great stuff we have available to make your own zine. And then lastly, outreach. The biggest outreach zine event we do is Olympia Zine Fest, which I'll talk about more in a bit. But I also incorporate zines into other outreach whenever it makes sense. And zine activities at outreach events are great, especially intergenerational events. Another type of outreach I do is with class visits, where like a teacher is giving an assignment that involves making a zine. So I'll come and kind of give a presentation on zines and help facilitate a workshop with the students. I just spent an entire day at a local high school doing this with every period of this one art teacher's classes, and it was awesome. So let's go a little deeper on some examples of zine programming that we've done. Here are some flyers for in-person events that happened pre-Pandy. We held a monthly drop-in zine club for 2 years, where folks could come and work on their projects and meet other people to collaborate with or bounce ideas off of, and we'd always do a little show and tell. So that was great. We also would do one-off events like all ages zine workshops, which in this example in the middle was paired with a musical performance that was after hours at the library. And then on the right, just an example, we always host the kickoff event for Olympia Zine Fest every year, with various activities like screen printing and open mic zine readings, or a DJ making a live mixtape of records people brought from home, lots of fun stuff like that. For an example of more passive programming, here's something I did during the pandemic, since we couldn't do in-person events. So instead of making a zine together around a theme, like in person, people could just submit their page to me anytime before the deadline and then pick up a copy of the community zine later. So this one we did was around the theme of the future. So on the left, this was the flyer handout or call for submissions. And then on the right, we have the final product, which was just put out in the library for anyone to take. Okay, so I've teased it enough, but it's time to talk about Olympia Zine Fest, which is a beautiful partnership for the library in many ways. So like many Zine Fests in cities all around the country, Olympia Zine Fest is an annual fest centered around a tabling expo, with zinesters selling their wares along with workshops and events in the community. So the fest is organized by a core group of volunteers pictured in the top left. There we are in the library. So I'm an organizer. I get to do it as part of my job because I'm really lucky, and it's part of my job to promote zines in the community. So the library supports Zine Fest not just in that way, but also helping to promote the event and hosting the kickoff event, which the middle picture is from one of the kickoff events pre-pandemic. And then we also table, of course, at the Tabling Expo, where we promote the zine collection, sign people up for library cards, and people can check out anything we've brought. So this picture on the right is from last year's fest, which was held outside for safety, as with this year's fest, which we'll be doing this September. Also, like I mentioned, I'll go around and buy zines directly from zinesters. So all in all, it's definitely a mutually beneficial situation for the library. So that's the Zine Fest. And that kind of wraps it up for me. So here's some info if you want to know more. I'm always available if you want to chat about any aspect of zines and libraries. And that's our Instagram and Zine Fest website. Cool. I'll just leave it up for a sec, but I'm pretty much done.
Thank you so much, Aggie.
Yeah.
Awesome. Beautiful collection. Okay, next up, we have the Zap Zine collection at the Seattle Public Library. Richard Visick is a librarian in the Arts, Recreation, and Literature Department at the Central Branch of the Seattle Public Library. Has previously worked as a librarian for Chihuly Studio and the Art Institute of Seattle, and was a volunteer at the Zine Archive and Publishing Project in the mid-aughts. Richard was also a judge for the 7th annual Washington State Zine Contest this year. So Richard, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, again, my name is Richard Visick. I'm a librarian for Seattle Public Library in our arts department. And among my duties, I get to work with the Zap Zine collection. I wanted to start today just by kind of giving you an overview of the history of the Zap Zine collection, especially since we have so many people who aren't from the Northwest who may not be familiar with it. But Zap, the Zine Archive and Publishing Project, was a volunteer-driven Seattle zine library and workshop space that housed over 30,000 zines, comics, chapbooks, and other small press or self-published periodicals. It was founded in 1996 as the Zine Archive Project, with 1P then, by local zine publishers Chuck Swaim, Gary Greaves, and Annie Fanning. They donated their collection of hundreds of zines to a local arts, literary arts organization called the Richard Hugo House. Zap became a program of Richard Hugo House and was housed in the same building as Richard Hugo House, but in many ways operated as kind of a independent program, mostly volunteer run. During its 18 years at Richard Hugo House, the volunteers added several thousand zines to the collection. They added a second P for publishing, and to go along with that, created a dedicated zine making and self-publishing workspace, which featured a lot of zine making tools and materials for zine makers. The volunteers did lots of zine making programming, both at the Hugo House space and out in the Seattle community. They provided open hours so that people could get access to this robust collection. And they categorized and cataloged many of the zines on a homegrown cataloging system that one of the volunteers actually created a SQL database, and they did a bunch of cataloging on that. In 2013, Richard Hugo House was building a new building, and so Zap split with Hugo House at that time. They became an independent nonprofit organization, and they looked to find a permanent, stable home for the collection, which, as I mentioned at that point, was up over 30,000 items. Looking for a place to store the collection was stored with Seattle Public Library in an off-site storage building, while Zap looked for a home and Hugo House built their new building. In 2017, Richard Hugo House decided to donate the entire collection to Seattle Public Library, and at that time, Zap closed as a nonprofit. So this collection came to Seattle Public Library in 2017. So this is in some ways it's an archival collection that came to us intact. Seattle Public Library also has two small circulating collections. They're uncatalogued collections, one here at Central Library in the Teen Center, one at our University District branch. But yeah, once the collection came here, it became housed in where I am right now. I'm in the zine room here on the 7th floor of our Central Library. at Seattle Public Library. And a work group formed, which I'm a part of, to decide how we would handle the zine collection and to work with the ongoing issues that arise with the collection. That work group is made up of managers, catalogers, and public services librarians. And our goal with that work group mostly is to honor the work of the ZAP volunteers and the spirit of their collective and what they did with the materials, and also to honor the spirit of zine making, to maintain this great archival collection, but also you know, to understand like the ongoing spirit of zine making as a continuing process. And so as a part of, you know, being part of a big public institution like Seattle Public Library, there's lots of advantages and disadvantages that come in line with that versus being a small, agile, you know, passionate volunteer-run organization. So one great thing is that the decision was made to catalog the entire collection. And I'm actually sitting in the room right between our items that have been processed and cataloged, put into these sleeves and put into these forward-facing boxes, and the old boxes that ZAP had, and the way that the collection was stored in those. So last time I checked our catalog, we had just over 6,100 catalog records. So that includes multiple items, you know, if it's a series, or there are also lots of second copies of items. But our catalogers have been great at moving through this, you know, huge collection. And like with Aggie and TRL, they are in our public catalog with the rest of, you know, all of our catalog materials. This collection does not circulate, so they're just, you know, listed as in-library reference items only. And so another decision that came with once we got the collection is how would we provide access to this collection? I mentioned that ZAP did a great job of providing lots of access to the collection. It's a little more difficult here. Pre-pandemic, though, we had set open hours in the library every week, kind of a small amount of hours. And then we would also schedule appointments we've got an email, zines@spl.org. People would contact that email, call the library, or, you know, do our Ask a Librarian, and set up appointments. We would get appointments from researchers, zine enthusiasts who just want to see the collection, a lot of class visits, and these were, you know, really great ways to provide access to the collection. And we try and have a librarian that works with the collection available to kind of help that visit along so that we could find materials of interest, maybe pull them beforehand, that sort of stuff. We have had a lot of interesting questions, a lot of interesting class visits, students everywhere from, you know, older elementary to middle school to high school and college students. It's always great when we get a class visit and then they'll send us the zines that they made from that visit. You know, interesting research that we've done recently. So I've got some of the zines here, but we were contacted by a public librarian in Canada who is also a women's skateboarding historian. She saw in our catalog that we have this gunk, which is kind of well known, but somewhat hard to find. Ramdasha Bixim, I believe is her last name, created this zine. She was part of a women's skateboarding collective. She was in a punk band, part of Riot Girl. And this skateboarding historian was researching her, and we were able to provide some materials that went into her website article on this particular skateboarder and zine maker. We've had a patron whose parent was a zine maker, and they came to research and find some of the zines. We happen to have some of the zines that parent had made. We recently had somebody researching the WTO uprising. So we get a lot of interesting research questions, and those more so as they in the catalog. Our catalogers have also done a great job of looking at subject terms and finding alternative vocabularies and things like that, so that they can really represent what's in these zines. And so we're getting kind of from all over the places, people are finding these in that catalog. It's making it a little more visible. We have also done a lot of programming with the zine collection. Pre-pandemic, we had 2 exhibitions. One we partnered with a community college here, North Seattle College, with some professors in their art department, and held an exhibition at their campus, in their gallery. Had some zine maker panels to go along with that, programming for that. We held an exhibition. We have a gallery in the 8th floor of our central library here. We held an exhibition there, and then had programs along with that where we did tours of the exhibition that also would come down afterwards and tour the collection itself. We held open houses, and then we've done a lot of zine making programs as well. School visits, especially we've got teen and children's librarians that are also in this work group. So they've done school visits. We've done lots of zine making programs here at the library. Used to have this may pick up if we are ever post-pandemic as well. We used to have a great plaza. We've got a plaza in front of the central library here, and we'd have this great program that an artist in resident would do a workshop. There were bands, and we would do zine making workshops to supplement that. Yeah, where it stands now, we are just kind of ongoing with making sure we're getting the entire collection cataloged, deciding what we'll do with the collection with second copies, how we can support programming, how we can support zine making. A lot of that, of course, has been on pause with the pandemic. We actually don't even have our central library is a 10-floor building, and we don't even have all of the floors open currently, including the floor that the zine room is on. But hopefully we'll be getting back to more programming that. There's a great local festival, comics and zines, called Short Run. It's an annual free tabling event, and there's lots of programming around that, and we've always partnered with them. And so this fall, when they're doing that again, we will be providing more programs here at Central Library to support that. We'll be tabling there again to show off some of the collection, and we'll be having open hours, or at least an open house again, to support that. That's really all I've got. I'm going to just share my one slide. I mentioned before, we have this email address, zines@spl.org. If you have any questions about the ZAP collection or zines at Seattle Public Library, please reach out to that email. It comes to me or any of the other public services librarians on this work group. And so, yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jared, for your awesome collection. Also, loving the coordination between the cardigan, lanyard, and the shelves behind you. Very nice section. So last but not least, we have the Collins Library Zine Collection at the University of Puget Sound. Katie Curtis is the humanities librarian at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington, where she provides instruction and research support as the liaison to several academic departments, including English and Gender and Queer Studies. Katie also established and curates the Collins Library Zine Collection. She has previously presented on zines as liberatory pedagogy, and her essay, co-authored with Dr. Regina Duffley of the University of Puget Sound, Teaching Power and Storytelling for Zines, appears in Engaging Undergraduates in Primary Source Research, edited by Yuan Xu. So welcome, Katie, and take it away.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to my slides, and then I will hopefully figure out how to share them with you. A little rusty on Zoom. Okay. I think waiting for things to catch up on my end. Hopefully everybody can see that now. Yeah. Okay. So hello, everyone. I am Katie Curtis. My personal pronouns are she, her, she, they. And as Sarah said, I am a humanities librarian at Collins Memorial Library at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma. As a librarian, I work really closely with a lot of different academic departments on campus, but I also curate our zine collection, which is very new to us. So I am a baby zine librarian, I think, compared to my other panelists. But our zines are some of my favorite materials to work with. I'm really excited to share them with you today. So in my mini tour, I'll introduce you to our collection and tell you a little bit about what it's like and how it came to us and what we're doing with zines at Puget Sound. So this is how it started, a true story. I started my position at Puget Sound in the summer of 2015. The following year, I attended the ALA annual conference in Orlando, Florida, and I won a starter zine collection of about 100 zines and a raffle. Really, this is a true story from the wonderful folks at the Zine Pavilion. If you're not familiar with the Zine Pavilion, or if you haven't heard of them before, it's put together by an informal group of librarians from the US and Canada. And during ALA, they have a dedicated space, usually in the exhibit hall for the conference that's all about zines. And so you can see an image that I stole from Instagram over on the left of this slide. So in this area, you know, they have a display, they have folks that are tabling their work, and sometimes they have readings and workshops as well. And so really the goal of this group is to talk to library workers about how they can incorporate zines into their libraries, what resources are out there. And so I went to the conference, I visited the Zine Pavilion, and I entered this raffle and I won, and I received a big cardboard box of zines, which you can see in the other image, in the mail to bring to our library, which was really fun and exciting, but also a little bit daunting because I hadn't worked much with zines before. This was less than a year into my first professional librarian position, and we didn't really have anything else like them in our collection at Puget Sound, at least not that we knew of at the time. Fortunately, our library director, Jane Carlin, is a really big supporter of the book arts. She's been really, really supportive of this collection as well. And the folks at the Zine Pavilion, of course, send along a list of resources with the big cardboard box. And so for me, I really, after receiving the zines, just spent a lot of time trying to familiarize myself with them and looking at what other zine libraries were out there, what they were doing. I did a deep dive on the zinelibraries.info website. I went to the Olympia Zine Fest and tried to get to know folks kind of in the area, what they were doing. I started buying stuff before we even had a collection because I was trying to kind of see or think about ways that we could organize things to kind of fit in with the curriculum that we have at Puget Sound. So in full transparency, the zine stayed in our cardboard box for almost a year before they made it into our collection. And a lot of that was just taking some time to figure out what the best approach would be for our library, for our campus. We had a little bit of turnover in the archives, and so just trying to get folks on board to help process this box and turn it into a collection. And in the meantime, I was still talking to faculty and students and just trying to see who would be interested, right, in these materials. So this is how it's going. Our zine collection now is part of the Archives and Special Collections at Collins Library. Unless you think I am a one-person operation, there are my two collaborators in the archives, Adriana Flores and Laura Edgar, in the image on the right. Our zines are housed in archival boxes. They're arranged alphabetically by title, and it's mostly just one big collection, although we do have a few kind of sub-series that are for things, materials related to zine culture, but aren't necessarily zines. We have some bound zine anthologies that are kind of a part of this collection. And then we have a special series for zines from mostly students and various groups at the university. And we went back and forth a little bit over whether or not to put the zines in the archives because we didn't want to limit our users' access to them. But ultimately, for us, we're an academic institution, and so we really want the collection to support teaching and learning at the university. We only have, single copies of most of the zines in our collection, but we've been doing a lot of programming and other work to make sure that folks know that they're here, right, and where they can get access to them. If you're curious about exactly what's in our holdings, you can find a finding aid for the collection. There's a link on this slide that was created by Laura. It lives on Archives Fest. We just updated it, so it is a very accurate representation of what we have currently. So right now we have over 500 zines. So we went from about 100 to 500 zines, and kind of like the Timberland Library, our collection's mostly contemporary. We have a few historical things, but it's mostly focused on contemporary zines. And the goal is really to kind of reflect kind of the breadth of the medium. So our zines cover a lot of different topics, including, national, local issues, politics. We have personal narratives, intersectional identities, activism, mini comics, basically anything you could list off the top of your head. And we also collect zines from our students, as I mentioned before. So on this slide, you're seeing several images of zines in our collection. On the left, there are some newer editions from the last couple years documenting the pandemic experience. In the center, there's an issue of Doris, which is a long-running feminist zine from the 90s. And then on the right are some zines created by Puget Sound students. And that includes a zine by KUPS, our university radio station, a zine from the Advocates for Detainees Voices, which is a student activist group. And their zine documents narratives from persons inside the Northwest Detention Center that's located in Tacoma. And then We Own Our Words. This one kind of in the bottom is a zine created by students in the Freedom Education Project Puget Sound program, FEPS program, which is a college program for incarcerated women, trans-identified, and gender nonconforming people in Washington State. But there's a lot there. So students encounter our zines in a lot of different ways throughout their time on campus, whether it's in class or through an event or a workshop that we're doing. We really do use our zines in classes across disciplines. So we've used them in English classes on Indigenous literature and rhetorics of resistance. We've used them in courses in gender and queer studies and the seminars in scholarly inquiry, which is our first year seminars on campus. So just an example of that right now, students in the intro course for the GQS program are making their own zines that are inspired by activist newsletters and pamphlets from early queer liberation movements in like the 60s and 70s. And we've been doing that project for a couple years now. So that's a really fun way that students are kind of taking the zine format and doing something different. Several times throughout the year, we're also hosting events and doing outreach to promote the collection. We want folks to know that they're available. So pre-pandemic, we were doing an annual fall zine series that included reading hours or like open houses in the archives where folks could come in and, we'd bring out the boxes and they could just pull stuff out and take a look at it. We've also done hands-on workshops in the makerspace and the book art studio in our library. We've done zine workshops for orientation for new students. During the time when we were fully remote, Adriana, our archivist, and I partnered with our human resources department. We did online Zoom workshops for faculty and staff on campus, kind of community building connection spaces for all of us when we weren't able to be together on campus. We've done workshops for the Puget Sound book artists and other outside organizations as well. And we did a lot of Zoom workshops during our fully remote time. I think Sarah came to one, and I'm happy to answer questions about about how we do that, how we approach that or set that up. And then of course, faculty, students, and community members are always welcome to visit the collection just for fun or for research. It's on the second floor of Collins Library, and we have open hours throughout the academic year where folks can just drop in, or they can email us to schedule an appointment. I have the contact information on my last slide. I did want to talk a little bit about why zines are important for us, like in our academic environment. And I'm just really happy to say that this collection is super popular. It's really just a wonderful part of our library. And I think that's because zines are really powerful teaching and learning tools. They open up avenues for multidisciplinary inquiry that traditional sources that students are usually working with in their classes don't do in really great ways. And so, you know, whether we're exploring or participating in alternative media, or looking at authorship, or looking at the actual like style and kind of format of the zine, or thinking about the topics that folks are writing about, there's just so many different ways that we've been able to make use of these resources and kind of get at different parts of the collection. I think zines are also really important for centering and introducing students to those voices and perspectives that they might not encounter in an academic space very often. We think a lot about, you know, the value of knowledge in different contexts and how that knowledge is produced and shared, right? And specifically through zine culture. And then finally, they're just fun, right? Like they help folks engage their creativity. I think they really decenter like the privilege of academic or scholarly writing or alphabetic literacy that is dominant, right, in our environment. And you know, when students create their own zines, they can really see themselves as participants and contributors to this larger conversation, like this larger community, in a way that writing a paper for their professor just doesn't accomplish in the same way. So a few of my favorite zines from the collection, we have a bunch, but they kind of, like I said, they run the gamut. So I just chose a couple that I thought were really fun. Basil is Dying, this one on the right, is from the original box of zines that we received from the Zine Pavilion. And it's this really wonderful personal zine about grief and the loss of a pet. It's really sad, actually, and we don't get to use this one in classes very often, but it's really just such a strong example of the personal and the kind of intimate nature of zines. To the left, I Will Fight You is a newish zine to us. This one contains blackout or like erasure poetry that's been created from tweets from Donald Trump, which is attempting to kind of push back against some of the hateful rhetoric present in those tweets. And I love this zine because students hate it. Like when we bring it out in class, they don't want to read it, like they want to avoid looking at this zine. And I think it's such a good opportunity to have conversations about the kind of like subversive ways that folks are using zines to communicate their ideas. And so I think it's a fun one to use with students. And then at the bottom, the New Tacoma Almanac is a new zine to us that was created this spring by students in a writing climate justice course that includes creative writing and illustrations. And so it's just an example of how folks on campus are using zines and just kind of enriching and adding to our collection. And so we're still growing. Like I said, we're kind of a baby collection, but I think we've made a lot of progress in the last few years, despite being remote for a time. So we're continuing to engage students with the collection in classes and kind of experimenting with different making methods with our book art studio and in partnership with our makerspace. This fall, we hope to revive our fall zine series and have some open houses and some workshops for students to come in and create stuff. We have an exhibit opening this fall as well at the library called Changing the Conversation, on the themes of social justice and activism, and that exhibit's going to feature artist books and zines and other items from our collection. So we're still going. And I think that's pretty much it for me. Thank you so much for listening. If you're interested in learning more about our collection, you can visit our collection guide on the library's website via the link. Or if you're local, you can make an appointment to see our zines in the archives. You can email us or follow us on Instagram at PS Archives. It's not specific to the zine collection, but you will see examples of our zines and many other wonderful items that we have. I will say for the first link, our zine collection guide, we are about to move to a new website. The library as a whole is about to move to a new website. So that page is going to change probably pretty dramatically in the next couple of weeks, but it will still be there. So if you just look us up, look up the library, you will still be able to find a link to that collection guide. And you can, of course, email me as well. And I'd be happy to direct you because I don't know what the new link or look is going to be quite yet. And for now, I'll turn things back over to Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aggie and Richard. Katie, that was awesome. I love how, you know, just like zines can be so many different things to so many different people, so can zine collections and zine libraries. Obviously, I have a lot of commonalities, but a lot of big differences even just between these three examples. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey, who has been collecting questions and is going to read them out to our panelists. So panelists, feel free to unmute yourselves and chime in. And also folks in the audience too, I know we have a lot of zine experts in the crowd. Feel free to chat in your answers as well.
Hi, everybody. That was amazing. I loved hearing everybody's different perspectives. So I've been collecting the questions, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and start at the very beginning and work my way down. And if I missed a question, please let me know. So you should be able to see them in the order that they appeared in the thread. So the first question is, and I think this is probably for anyone, how do you go about sourcing and obtaining zines? Are they all donations? I've started a little zine library in Ottawa, and I would love to hear some tips on how to build up a collection. Anyone want to try that one?
Well, I think, again, Katie, you're probably better at that. That's a thing that with Seattle Public, you know, Timberland is doing it the right way, that they have a budget. We do have a lot of administrative support, but we do not have a collection budget. And, you know, ethically, the thing to do is buy the zines from the zine makers. The original collection was, you know, much of it was through donations, and people do still want to donate to the collection. So we do get them that way, but we don't have as active a collection development policy at SPL as some other places do.
Thank you, Richard. And yeah, I think Aggie kind of addressed some of this in their presentation, but Timberland did start by buying some zines through distros and then through the Zine Fest, and originally also through the Comics Festival, the Olympia Comics Festival. And then Aggie gets them in a lot of other places now. So I'll let Aggie chime in.
Sure. I'm also going to put a link in the chat. There are zines out there that people want you to print and share widely. So Sprout Distro is just one of those places. That's kind of an aggregator where they put out new zines this month. They're mostly political, anarchist flavored, but that's one way you can get free zines that want to be free if you don't have any kind of budget. But you can definitely solicit donations. You can join zine library groups where you could ask, you know, anybody's discarding zines or want to donate duplicates that you have. Zine librarians are, like all librarians, pretty generous into sharing with each other. So that's one way. And also ALA, you could win a starter collection if you're lucky. But they do that every year at ALA. just some more ideas. Also, if there's a zine fest in the area, or you can go to, zinesters like to trade. So if you made like a library zine and brought copies and like tried to trade that way, that's another idea for soliciting free zines. But obviously, ethically, ideally, you're buying them. But I know that's not always possible. So there's some more ideas for you.
Thank you, Aggie. Katie, did you want to address that question, or I feel like you kind of
Sure.
addressed
I
it too?
think it mostly use the same strategies. I really like going to the events if you can find one in your area. It's just a really great opportunity to meet people and talk to folks. And I like to let folks know where their zines are going as well, right? And so it's a little bit easier to do that in person. But we've also, everything that's come to, most of the things that have come to our collection since that original cardboard box have been zines that we've purchased, and we've done that, you know, in a variety of ways through those in-person opportunities, but also online. I saw Diane put in the chat on Etsy. I've been on Etsy. I've visited websites for zine distros, and so it's there's not a correct method. I think there are a lot of different options. Was where I land on that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and a couple of people did say that, you know, they got zines on Etsy, and then Mary said skate shops in their area carry zines, some of which they distribute for free. And then Kathy said, tell zinesters their zine will be in the library catalog and they can look themselves up. I really enjoy that. Okay, let's see. Here's the next question, and this one is for Aggie, but I'm sure you could all respond to this one. I'd love to hear about your zine weeding process. How do you make the excruciating decisions of what to weed to keep the collection fresh? I was very bad at this.
Yeah, let's collect my thoughts here. So we have a limited amount of space, obviously, and we're always putting new zines in, so that means in with, you know, out with the old and with the new. So like all of the library collection, we regularly weed by both condition and looking at circulation statistics. So what I've arrived at, I can be a little more lenient with the zines than other areas of the library, but if it hasn't circed in 4 years, that's a pretty good indicator that it's not going to. To make it a little easier though, is we put any zines we're removing from the collection into our back hallway, and they do get taken. And then there's a few more spots I'll save specific zines for specific reasons. So they don't just go in the trash, which is great. But yeah, generally I keep it to it has to circ in the last 4 years, with exception to some of my favorites. If they're part of a serial, you know, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't want to just get rid of 3. So I have to look at that as well. So it's luckily I just get to make the calls. Of course, I'm going to have some bias, but generally, yeah, the numbers and the condition makes the decision for me.
Thank you, Aggie. Does anyone else want to chime in on weeding?
For the ZAP collection, since it is an archival collection, it's not as much an issue, but we do weed for condition, especially there might be materials that we want to make sure that you know, a mold or something isn't spreading through the collection. So we do weed for collection. We did, you know, I said we don't have an active collection development policy, but ZAP was very thoughtful in there. They eventually came up with a collection development policy that talks about topic and things like that. So definitely, if things are coming in, there are certain, you know, we're not going to add like racist scenes or homophobic scenes or that sort of stuff to the collection. But since we're an archival collection with the space, it kind of makes it, you know, and since they don't circulate, we don't take in consideration circulation.
Thank you. Katie, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I mean, same for us, since our collections in the archives, we're still fairly new, so I don't think this question has come up for us yet, although we do have limited space. But I think, you know, some of the similar criteria will, you know, applies to our collection as well. And I think for us also, we also consider what is relevant for the curriculum and for what the students and the faculty are doing on campus, right? Because we both want to kind of show the breadth of the format, but also we're collecting specifically to support some of those other activities. So I think that would probably play into those decisions somewhat as well.
Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, and this is just a comment from Sarah White. Zine culture in Ole is alive and well. My 3-year-old just made her first one-page zine at her preschool yesterday. Her preschool teacher is a former zine volunteer at the Olympia Library. That's Polly at Sandbox School. Maybe Sarah will correct me. Okay. And I saw that zine, it was awesome. Are there ways to make zines and zine collections more accessible to users, like large print books and other formats that people have tried? I think this is a really interesting question. Does anyone want to tackle that one?
So is that specifically like a format question? Like,
I think that the person that asked it was talking about, yeah, just kind of making them easier to read or
yeah.
format. And if that person is still here, they're welcome to chime in and clarify on that.
Yeah, we do, you know, so for in person, we do at all of the info desks here, so near to the zine room, we do have kind of an accessibility kit that includes various magnifying things. But yeah, I mean, it would be great to, there's a whole issue with like you know, making things accessible digitally, electronically, and you know, that's not something we're doing, but some places are doing that. But it would, yeah, be great to have speech to text, be able to use Zoom readers, all that kind of stuff on them. But yeah, what we are doing, you know, would just be kind of like magnifying devices, I think.
Thank you. And then I think there's a little clarification in the chat, more accessible formats, as well as tools for zine making accessible for people with mobility issues. These are great questions. And then Jennifer said, I heard of a program that was recording audio versions of zines for folks with visual impairments. Can't remember where that was. And then Aggie said, Residence was doing audio versions of anarchist zines. So yeah, I personally would love to see bigger text in zines, and I've actually told zine makers that in the past, specific ones who write really small. I'm like, you know, I'm getting old, like that text to be a little bigger. And I do think, like, you know, a lot of times zines are limited by the size of the paper that's available. But sometimes those big 11 by 17 zines that are folded in half are maybe a little more accessible. But I do think that's a subject that could use more reflection. So
yeah, I think especially, you know, zine programming, I think that's something we personally could do a better job of. We've got our LEAP department here, which is Library Equity and Access Program, that department that works with disabled folks. I have partnered with them and even went and did a zine making program for a group of students with that department. And that was through Seattle Public Schools. And they had, you know, they kind of had, we went to their building and they had kind of more accessible tools for cutting, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about. We do, you know, a lot of the workshops we do, it's like we've got the tiny little safety scissors for people to cut with, and we do have, you know, markers and different tools, but yeah, definitely we should be considering much more of that.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to chime in on that? Okay.
I'll just say really quickly that Katie talked about it earlier, but the online how to make a zine workshops that Katie hosted are pretty great for folks who maybe couldn't leave the house. But I was very impressed by how you managed to do something that's so hands-on, but in a really great way online when we couldn't get together.
I
Yeah,
agree.
thanks, Sarah. That's really nice to hear. And I think that's one of the best things about the format, though, right? Is that there's really no wrong way to do it and no specific materials that are necessary, right, to create a zine. And so that's what we really emphasized in those online workshops. And we do on our zine collection guide, there's a tab about making zines that has like lists of various materials that folks could use at their disposal if they have them. We also created a bunch of templates online there's one using Google Slides. There are a couple of templates using Canva that are on our collection guide that are free for folks to use. And so if you want to go and steal them, I would be happy if anybody in this meeting did so. So please check them out and feel free to use them in your own work.
Thank you. Okay, next question. This one was for Richard, talking about the zine sleeves that were that you showed. Those zine sleeves are neat. Where did you find them?
You're muted, Richard.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, they are very cool, but our catalogers, in conjunction with some of our special collections librarians, just from our vendors, their magazine sleeves that come in two sizes. But yeah, they just got these from the vendor. They also have a hook if you want to present that way, but we do them in these front-facing see-through boxes. They've also come up with, I think these are similar to the boxes that Timberland uses for the zine sets, but for things that present unique challenges. Like this one is a hand-painted toilet paper tube that then has the zine rolled up inside. So they've, just whatever vendor our catalogers use, they were able to get it from there.
All right. Here's another question for you, Richard. With the ZAP collection, was SPL able to transfer or upload the original ZAP database to the SPL catalog, or did SPL have to do the original cataloging for every single zine from ZAP? That's a good question. Yeah, SPL is, we still have access to, and actually anybody, if you search ZAP Seattle, you will see the old, I think that you might know Violet Fox, librarian, zine maker. I think Violet has kept I think Violet is paying to keep the old thing up there. So their old catalog is also available. Their old website is available. But so we had access to all of that. The ZAP volunteers were great about all of this archival material, turning that over. But unfortunately, I think our catalogers make use of it, but they had to they're doing original cataloging for each individual record. Thank you. Sarah and Laura, I have about, let's see, 4 or 5 more questions. Should I keep rolling?
Maybe just one more, and then we'll split into groups for anyone who wants to stay and do a little.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see. This is hard. Okay. I think I'll go with this one. Can you talk about resources that zine librarians have to connect with each other and support each other's work? I think some of those are getting answered in the chat a little bit as people share. Did anyone have anything to add to that? Yeah, I feel like I've been talking so much, but I've zinelibraries.info.
is a website that has a lot of information on it. And then they have a listserv, and I found that listserv pretty invaluable.
Agreed. The other thing that's back after being kind of corrupted and spammed is Zine Wiki, which is really great. It's like a Wikipedia for zines, and it's like Wikipedia, you know, kind of crowdsourced. Yep, and yeah, Aggie said Zine librarians on Facebook. Okay, I think there's one more really good question. So I'm gonna sneak this one in because they asked it twice. How can someone who is not currently in the library system bring the idea of a zine library up and potentially get one in their local libraries? I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, Kelsey and I did a webinar for librarians who want to start a zine collection that you can find. I'll find the link. I'll put it in the chat. But that might be a good.
That would be great. And then, yeah, there was a request for the presenters to drop their emails in the chat as well. One more thing I was going to mention is Kathy Camper is going to be presenting at the upcoming Zines and Libraries Conference, virtual conference geared towards librarians and library workers who are working with or interested in working with zines. And that's with Anne Matsusima Chu and Maria Cunningham, July 7th and 8th. So maybe Kathy will share more information about that when she has it, maybe with Sarah. So, okay, I'm gonna stop at this point. Thanks for all that. There was a lot of good questions.
Awesome. Thank you for moderating that portion, Kelsey. So now we're gonna, you know, when we used to have these crawls and tours in person, we would have a nice little kind of social element where we actually got to speak to other folks who have interests or work in special libraries. So if you would like to stay for that portion, just stay here and you'll be plopped into a breakout room. If you have to go, we also understand. I'm also going to put some information in the chat about there's 2 zine projects that we do at the Washington Center for the Book. They're for any and all Washingtonians, they're both all ages. We just finished up our 7th annual Washington State Zine Contest. So the winners are on our site. When they're digitized, they will be there as well as in our catalog. But that the 8th annual contest will open up probably just in time for the Ole Zine Fest in early September. And then we're still kind of collecting either a few pages or completed zines that have to do with COVID-19 experiences. And sadly, that's ongoing, so we still don't really have a deadline on that. But if you want help bringing either of these projects to your community in Washington, feel free to email me. I also do that in the chat. And I mean, even if you're not in Washington, I'm happy to talk to you about those projects as well. But Laura is working on throwing us into breakout rooms now. And so, and then at the very end, we'll say a last goodbye. We'll definitely be done by 1:30, but feel free to log off if you need to. And otherwise, we'll see you in